Hi, my name's Chloe and today I'm going to be covering the topic microbes and how they are everywhere in our world. But before we get into all of that, let's talk about what are they? Microorganisms are small organisms that are invisible to the naked eye because of their extremely small size. Microorganisms can be grouped into different groups such as bacteria, fungi, algae, protozoa, and viruses. Microbes can and do live on your skin and throughout your body. While yes, that sounds a little bit intimidating and honestly a little bit gross, many microbiologists say that as long as humans can't live without carbon, nitrogen, protection from disease, and the ability to fully digest their food, they can't live without bacteria. Microorganisms, however, can be transmitted in many different ways. Direct contact is the transfer by direct physical contact with an infected or colonized individual. Indirect contact is the transfer of microorganisms via an object. Transmission via droplet particles are droplets from the respiratory tract during coughing or sneezing that are propelled through the air and enter the nasal or oral passage of the new host. Transmission by airborne particles is when microorganisms are carried by dust or other small particles floating in the air. Next is common vehicle. This is the transmission through contaminated sources, for example, foods or medications. And then there is vector-borne. These are infections caused by animals or insects. An example of this is the West Nile virus. Many different types of microorganisms are found on a lot of things that you would use every day. A high concentration of microorganisms can be found on things such as your phone, door handles, ATM machines, public seating, and money. Let's use ATMs for an example. They're available for public use, and you can pretty much use any ATM wherever you are, regardless of your circumstances. While this is very useful, it also harbours a lot of microbes that you just cannot see. Whether exposure is wanted or not, exposure to bacteria has shown to be an important part of the development of our immune systems. Exposure to bacteria, both benign and harmful, is what primes the immune system to respond to pathogenic invaders later in life. Now that we've covered the general idea of how microbes can be transferred and where they can live, let's take a look at some pros and cons of the effects that they can have on humans. Let's start with bacteria. Most people have a basic understanding of it. They're taught that bacteria leads to disease, so it's easy to think that they harm humans. An example of a harmful bacteria is Salmonella typhi. This causes typhoid fever, an illness that can last for weeks and causes poor appetite, abdominal pain, high fever, diarrhea, and generalized aches and pains. But an example of a good bacteria is Staphylococcus aureus. Staph aureus lives all over human skin and generally provides a protection layer and keep out other bacteria that can cause harm. But if you were to get a cut or your immune system was to become compromised, these bacteria could cause an infection. Another example of a positive bacteria is Lactobacillus, a bacteria that normally lives in our digestive, urinary, and genital system. This bacteria can also be found in fermented foods such as yogurts. In industries, there are many other good bacteria that are needed to make things such as curd, cheese, vinegar, lactic acid, alcohol, and even ripening of tea leaves. Now let's move on to fungi. Most people will instantly think of mushrooms or something along those lines, but really, there are many other types. An example of a good fungi is Penicillium notatum. This is used to make some strains of antibiotics. Other useful strains of fungi are yeast, which is used to make dough in bakery, and alcohol. Trichophyton is a not-so-nice fungi that can lead to athlete's foot. Fungi can also cause a large number of diseases in plants and in animals, such as rust diseases in plants, fruit rot in apples, red rot in sugarcane, and ringworm disease in humans. Moving on to algae. Algae are a diverse group of aquatic organisms that can conduct photosynthesis. Anabaena, for example, is a type of algae that partakes in biological nitrogen fixation. Some useful algae are chlorella, which produce protein and vitamin, red algae, agar, and brown algae, which make iodine and potassium. Blue-green algae and red tides can be harmful to aquatic organisms because when they die, they produce toxins that are quite poisonous. Next, we're going to talk about protozoa. Protozoa are single-celled eukaryotes. These are organisms with nuclei, and they have many advantages to humans. Some help in the final degradation of waste and sewage, while some are symbiotic in nature. Paramecium, for example, kill off harmful bacteria, but others can cause sleeping sickness and among other harmful effects to humans. Now finally, we come to viruses. This again is a term that a lot of people have an idea of. Most know that a virus can cause the common cold, influenza, herpes, hepatitis, rabies, and many, many other things. And whilst viruses don't necessarily offer humans any immediate benefits, there are viruses that are useful in making vaccines and are useful for scientific research, such as in biotechnology, genetic engineering, gene therapy, and for making antibiotics. So you may be thinking at this point, okay, there's a lot of different things that could hurt us, but what's the point in telling me? Well, the point of all this information is to inform people about just how high of a potential concentration level of microorganisms are genuinely everywhere, and they're on items that people use every day and just don't know. Most of these items have a high transmission rate too. Think about how often people use their phones while they eat or touch and hold items that thousands of people before have touched. And these people might be carrying some harmful microbes. The point is, microbes are everywhere in our world. Whether we see them or not, they're there. In closing, I'll leave you with a little PSA. Clean your phones. You may not think that it's a necessity, but it really is. Wash your hands. We should all know this by now. And be careful. Just in general, you never know what something might lead to, or who you're touching, or what you're touching. So, from all of the microbes on your phone, on your device, or whatever you tend to watch this on, we all say thank you for listening.